Hi, this is the Social Gelo with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Gelo with Angelo show.
What's up? And welcome to Social Gelo with Angelo podcast. I'm here again with Mitch Powell, the KSDI historian. If you saw the title, if everything stays to plan and whatnot, when did the Kajukenbo name go public? Before we even start, I'm just gonna say I'm running off about 2 to 3 hours of sleep for the last 4 nights because my daughter's been sick, and I know Mitch might come up with some quizzes. Last time, with fully rested, I failed every single one of Mitch's quizzes. So I'm not rested. Let's see how badly I do today. So Mitch, thanks for coming on the show. So let's just start with what people think they know. What would you say, so anybody who just clicked on, hey, thanks for watching, you're going to get your first maybe answer right now. A lot of you tend to jump in the comments and put the answer before watching the video. Thank you for taking a few seconds to listen to the video. What's the answer that you think, oh, I'm going to quiz you, Mitch. What's the answer you think people are going to jump on and say when they see that title? When did Kajukenbo go public? Or when was Kajukenbo? Okay, I'm even going to go with confusion, the difference between public and founded. But what do you think people are throwing on there right now in the comments?
Well, I think most people believe Kajukenbo was founded or created in 1947. So it's going to be something like that, or from 47 to 49 when the co-founders got together. They got to throw out some number like that. And if this piques our interest, it's none of that. So, but before we go there, this guy with 2 to 3 hours of sleep forgot to say, this is Social Gelo with Angelo podcast. And if you like it, click the little thingy at the bottom there. He always forgets until the very, very end, and he goes, oh, yeah. So if you like these videos, click the like button. How'd I do?
You did better than I did. Thank you very much for doing that for me. So that's the thing, right? People, like you said, 1947. That's what you'll hear. I don't know how many YouTube videos I've seen that say that too. I'm guessing it's because that's what it says on the Wikipedia page. Is that what it says on the Wikipedia page?
I'm not sure, because I looked at it a few different times, and it's so flawed that it's really hard for me to look at that and want to read any of it, because it's a best case scenario if everything was accurate. For a lot of people that don't quite understand what Kajukenbo was all about or where it comes from, look, man, you got to look at John Bishop's books. John's a grandmaster in Kajukenbo, has been doing it for a long, long time. But more than that, he has authored a couple of the earliest Kajukenbo books, and his source was Adriano Imperato, the co-founder of Kajukenbo, along with a whole bunch of other people who provided him information. His books tell the story. What we do, or what I do as a historian with the KSDI, is I try to identify pieces of the story, maybe more elaborate, or I've found some documents that might suggest, look at this a little closer, look at that a little closer. No matter what I've come up with in the last 10 years, nothing has changed the story that John Bishop has written in any of his books. 5 co-founders started training together in 47, trained for a couple of years, came up with techniques, and the art grew from there. That's never been debated, and it shouldn't be, because that's accurate.
So let's throw it out there then. So when did the Kajukenbo name first get used publicly?
Well, let's do this, Angelo. Let's look at when, or actually who came up with the name Kajukenbo. Let's do that, right? So let me go back a ways. There was a video in 1987. Beyond McCarroll's organization brought together Joseph Holk and Adriano Imperato. They sat them down, and these two were interviewed, 2 of the co-founders of Kajukenbo. And Vince Black was the interviewer. So while he's conducting the interview, he asked Imperato how the group wound up training together. which is a pretty unique question. He's sitting there going, well, wait a minute, how'd you guys even get together, right? So Imperato explains it. He says, well, Frank Ordonez and Peter Chu, they got us together as a group. And we decided we would make a date and we would go to the Kaheka gym and we would test each other out. And he said it was me and, Hulk and Peter Chu and Frank Ordonez and George Chang. All five of us got together to test each other out. So that was the first time they ever trained together. They didn't get together to make a martial arts style up. They got together to see how their arts would do against each other. So they did that training, and obviously it worked out well because they continued to train together over the next couple of years. So in this interview process, when Vince Black puts this out there, Adriano Imperato also says, then someone came up with the name. So Hulk, he's kind of, doing the song and dance because he wants to get in and answer this question. And finally he says, I was the one that came up with the Kajukenbo name. And Imperato then turns around and says, oh yeah, you were the one. So if you believe that video, then Joseph Hulk came up with the name Kajukenbo. But wait, there's more. In a 1991 interview, Vince Black, again, he's doing the interview. This time, besides Hulk and Imperato, is Peter Chu. So now you've got three of the co-founders, and they're together. So in this interview, Chu claims that he created the name Kajukenbo, and that it was in 1947 at his home. And at that time, he lived at 574 P Road in the Damon Track area with his parents. So he says, hey, it was this house at this time, and you guys were there. Everybody was there. So if you believe that, then Peter Chu came up with the name Kajukenbo. But wait, there's more. Frank Ordonez has also been noted as saying he had a role in them coming up with the name Kajukenbo. Now, he didn't say he created the name, but he said he had a role in the decision-making process. So three of the co-founders had some kind of role in coming up with this name. So based on this, we don't know who to credit exactly, but what we do know is during the time that they trained together, they came up with the name Kajukenbo. So Chu says 1947, and then Imperato, he's interviewed by John Bishop for John Bishop's books, and he says Hulk came up with a name about a year or so after we started training together. Puts the name somewhere around 1948, maybe even early 49. So you've got Hulk and Imperato saying it was Hulk, and you got Chu saying it was him. So which one? We don't know exactly, but it's really not that important. What's important to note for what we're doing today is there was a name. It was Kajukenbo, and it was early, 47, 48, 49. But I think we really need to identify that part.
And you just cleared up one thing right there, right? Because this is why I like doing this stuff. It's always, and we've talked about this, the game of telephone that happens with an esoteric martial art like Kajukenbo. Most of the stuff is not documented. You actually have the documents, but most of the stuff, most of the stories, a lot of the stories, are just passed on from one generation to the next. Usually not even in a formal setting. Like, it's not like some schools I heard do. Like I've chuckled a little bit when I see a school that's like, oh yeah, we have a test. We make the students take a test, and they have to do a written test and write an essay and do a multiple choice of history on Kajukenbo. And if you're doing that, awesome. I didn't. Most of the people I know didn't. And what normally in my circles of Kajukenbo were a little bit rough. It's usually like we just got done sparring, we're tired, we're banged up, and then someone decides to talk about how, how Kajukenbo was started. They just kind of briefly mentioned it's 1947 and how there's blood on the floor. Classes it over to blood on the floor. Great job. Who said it? Who knows? Maybe it was Imperato, maybe it wasn't. But they'll tell you Imperato said that, and then we'll end class. And or even worse, after the fact, we're licking our wounds, drinking a few beers, and then we'll start talking about Kajukenbo history 3 beers deep. So like, yeah. So that's why I like having this conversation with you, kind of clear that stuff up. And already in what you just said, 1947, that's why people are saying that on the Wikipedia page. 1947, because of the video they saw, because you said it was a documented video, so that makes sense of Chu claiming he started the name in 1947.
Right. And even if he didn't make it in 47, they didn't do it until 48 or even 49. At least we know when the co-founders trained together, they had a name. And here in that same 91 video, Peter Chu explained how they came up with the name. Have you ever heard the story of how they came up with the name Kajukenbo?
No. Well, what do you think? Okay, I'll tell you the urban legend from what I remember.
Okay.
I'll tell you the urban legend version, then you can be accurate on this one. I was told, and I'm not even going to mention who it was, because if they're going to be like, I didn't say that, because I'm trying to dig into a conversation I had probably after getting punched in the face 10 years ago. I was told when I asked that question that there were 5 masters. It was like 4 or 5 masters in Hawaii. And one of them was a karate master, one of them was a judo master, one of them was a kung fu master, and one of them was a professional boxer. And that these guys would bang all the time in Hawaii. And that they all got together before the war. And they didn't even mention which war, so I assumed it was World War II. Later, I'd find out it was the Korean War. But at the time, since there was no context here, before the war, that's all I was told. So I'm like, okay, World War II, I guess, because they said that the name came about in 1947. So I guess we're talking about 1945. So, all right. So before World War II, there was these badasses. There was a karate master, a judo master, a kung fu master, and a professional boxer. And they were just duking it out, right? Just going at it. And after duking it out one day, they realized that instead of fighting each other, they should make their own style because they're doing something different. And one of them, they didn't say who, decided to say, hey, you're karate, you're judo, you're kung fu. Let's just do an acronym, Kajukenbo. And then after that, the war started. I assumed it was World War II, and everybody died in World War II in 1945. They all fought the Nazis and didn't come back. And God rest their souls, Adriano Emperado is the only survivor. And he took this on and carried the legacy with them and in my head, so that the legacy can continue for these 5. He wasn't one of the masters in this story. He was just the guy that trained with these masters, and they bestowed on him the legacy that he carried with him to honor them in their deaths in World War II. I mean, I like my story a lot. I don't tell it to anyone, but it sounds really cool.
It's not that far-fetched from some of the stories that I've heard. It's a completely inaccurate, but it's not that far-fetched. But let me share what was said in the interview, 1991 interview. Peter Chu is talking about how they came up with the name Kajukenbo. So they had taken some paper and they wrote down letters to represent their various martial arts styles. So they wrote Kempo, Karate, so they wrote K-E-N and K-A for Kempo and Karate. And they wrote J-U for Judo and Jiu-Jitsu, and they wrote B-O for boxing. And they put these letters on a table. And based on the way he explained it, I'm thinking they're probably in his living room or maybe the kitchen. They're on the table, the letters are there, and they're moving the letters around. And one of the names they came up with was Kajukenbo. And when Chu explained that, it was, Kempo, Karate, Judo, Jiu-Jitsu, and boxing, both Western style of boxing, and then the Chinese style, which we call Kung Fu or Gung Fu, right? So he explains that, and he said they didn't like the name. And as Chu is explaining this, Polk and Imperato, they're laughing at the different names they came up with, because I think they must have came up with several. But then Chu says, he took the K-A and he moved it over to the front. So instead of being Kempo Karate, it became Karate. And he moved it to the front, and they moved the letters around until they got Kajukenbo. And according to Chu, in this interview, he said 1947 Damon Track right there, Kajukenbo. So that's his explanation of the date and the time and how they came up with mixing the letters together. Now, at that particular time, based on the information that I have, Joseph Hope was a brown belt in Danzanryu Jiu-Jitsu, and the other four co-founders at that time didn't have any rank. They hadn't earned any rank in any martial arts styles, but they were well trained. You know, they had training in Kempo, karate, they had training in boxing, they had training in jiu-jitsu and judo and so forth. And to say like one person only knew this is not very fair or accurate either, because they cross-trained. They just didn't get the belts yet. And that stuff came a little bit later, but not that far behind. So when they got together in the beginning, Imperato, if anything, he was a Kempo practitioner. He'd been training with Chow for a little while, but he was probably more noted at that time, and even the years to follow, as a street fighter. So his skill set was how to win a fight, and I'm sure it wasn't that pretty. And Joe Hope now, he was a combat instructor in the military. He went in the military during World War II and ended up becoming a hand-to-hand combat instructor for the 9th Infantry over in Europe. So while he's around and he's doing his thing, you know, he's got to be well accomplished. I'm sure he's very structured because he just came out of a military setting. All 5 of the co-founders were in the Army. Imperato was in the first Filipino regiment, but he was still in the Army. All 5 were in the Army. So they all had that structure to draw from while they're, you know, creating whatever they're creating. So, look, we know the co-founders created the name Kajukenbo, and according to Peter Chu, we know how they came up with the name by mixing the various arts together. So it kind of leads us over to, when was this Kajukenbo name used publicly? They had it, but when did you see it on paper? And that's kind of where we are. That's really what we're doing today, right?
So now it makes sense then. And I get that. That's why I like reading by the urban legend to what actually happened. But because I always say, like, your urban legend and your game of history telephone that we play and what we do, you are going to end up finding some elements of what actually happened. So there definitely was that World War II element. There definitely was that military element. That's there in that original story. They embellished, you know, it's always more exaggerated and
You don't believe the part about
legendary.
slaying the dragons?
I love that part. When the dragon came and they took out
One
their
of them
swords.
was, one of them was the influence for, you know, Game of Thrones and just the whole ability to slay dragons.
So it's really cool to see how where it came from, right? They all were from the military, so that's where that story came from. And
in Korean War is why they stopped training together. In that 87 video, Joe Hogue says that he left in 49 to go to infantry school. Now, he was in the military. Hogue went in, got out, went back in. Imperato did too. Well, you'll read stuff about him going into the military, and he went in 44, I believe it was, 44 or 45. I have it written down, but it's December of that year, December 45. And he gets out about, 15 months later. And then he's back in Hawaii, and he's at the housing for veterans. He's living there with his fiance. And then he goes back in the military. So after this group breaks up, George Chang he's out of the Army. He goes into the Merchant Marines or the Marines, at Marine Reserves. So he's gone again. And he's the one they thought died in Korean War, and he didn't. He came back home. But these guys were all involved in the military. So not only did they have a military background, but they also grew up in Hawaii and, saw the devastation from the bombs being dropped on December 7th, and all the chaos I'm sure that came out of that. So not only were they, learning the martial arts, I'm sure while they're training, they're trying to figure out how to stay alive for as long as they can and how to be, good, strong, American citizens so they can go and fight this war.
And so, okay, so then my other question. So I know I don't want to sidetrack us too much, and I know we're going to try to stick to a time frame. But did any of them die in the war?
No.
Okay, all right,
No.
all right.
And a lot of people, unless you really get deep in it, you don't understand that Joseph Holk was a full bird colonel. He had an excellent military career. His brother was heavily decorated in the military. These guys were, they're patriots. And Peter Chu is a retired first sergeant. These guys, they did well. Imperato, when he was in his second enlistment, he was a corporal and he was a medic. These guys did well in the military, not only serving their country, but creating the person they were going to be later on.
So, if I have my timeline correctly, they finished up around 47, 48, either.
Well, they finished up in 49 when Hope went
49.
to the infantry school.
Okay.
That was the last time they had trained together as a group.
All right, so 49. And at this point in our story, Chu claims he made the name in 47. Joseph Hulk is verified by Imperato and that he claims the name in 1948. They go to the war, they come back. They all come back.
Well, what happens is Imperato had already been in the military. So when Hulk left, Imperato had already gotten out of the military. He got out sometime in, I think, July of 48. So he was already done. He'd served his military duty. Peter Chu stayed in for 20 years. So he was in from 46 to 66, I believe. So he served 20 years. George Chang, when he left in 49, they didn't see him again. They all thought he was dead. And then Frank Ordonez, I believe, got out in 49. I don't have those records in front of me because this was a completely different topic. But the two that are primarily still in the military are Chu and Hulk. And since Hulk left, he went to, I believe, California for infantry training. Now that he's gone, Imperato has gone on and he's teaching his own students. So we're actually going to pick up from where Imperato is teaching his own students because that's really where the name is first used publicly. You want to go from there?
Yeah, let's go from there.
Okay, so let's look at this. So I have a newspaper article, and it's dated November 27th, 1957. And in the article, the school is listed as the Plama Wahiwa Kempo Club. And the article lists the instructors. So as of November 27th, 1957, the instructors are Adriano Imperato, Joseph Imperato, and Marino Tiwanak, and they're teaching the Kempo style at the Plama Settlement. And George Sharonio, otherwise known as George Polly Sharonio, he is teaching at the Wahiwa Kempo Club. So he's got two clubs, Plama and Wahiwa. Sharonio's at one, and these other three are at the other. So that article, 1957, is right here. Can be found very simple on a Google search for Ancestry.com and go from there. And if you can see at the bottom, I know it's backwards, but you can see their names because it lists them as the instructors. So if you look at that article, you say, okay, well, Imperato obviously had schools, had a couple of them in 57. But then I located an article from December 7th of 1957. And the article talks about the Plama Wahiwa Kempo Club, and they're sponsoring a dance at a gym. So this is the Wahiwa gym. This is the article right here. So all it's talking about and the purpose behind keeping this document is that as of December 7th, 1957, the school is still called the Plama Wahiwa Kempo Club. And all of that changes 3 weeks later. So on the 28th of December, 1957, there's an article. It says self-defense group elects officials. In the article, we learn that the Kajukenbo Self-Defense Institute of Palama Settlement has elected their officials for 1958. And it names those folks in the article. So it says that Adriano Imperato, he is the chief instructor. And Joe Imperato, he is the assistant chief instructor. Marino Tiwanak, he is the Kajukenbo instructor. Ben Kakuma, Anton Silva, Charlie Lee, and a few others, they're the directors. Aleo Reyes is the secretary treasurer. And then they have a sergeant of arms. And that is this article right here. So this article right here is the first known public use of the name Kajukenbo and of the organizational name, the Kajukenbo Self-Defense Institute. Now, I want to say and stress this intensely. This is a newspaper article that I have located. Are there others out there? I don't know. I couldn't find them. That doesn't mean they don't exist. And others may have documents and paperwork that say, wait a minute. But we have to go by the dates that we have. So the last time that I could find the Palama Waiwa Kimpo Club is December the 7th. The first time that I find Kajukenbo and Kajukenbo Self-Defense Institute is December 28, 1957. So when George Polistronio passed away, he was a great grandmaster at the time, the only great grandmaster in Kajukenbo under the KSDI. When he passed away, he left behind a box of martial arts, Kajukenbo memorabilia, etc. And thankfully, his grandson, Professor Albert Sadler, was contacted, and Albert was asked if he wanted to keep this stuff. And Albert graciously accepted. And Albert's a very close friend of mine. We've known each other for over 30 years. He brought the stuff to me and let me look through it. And it's all really cool. But one thing that really stood out, especially from a research perspective, is inside that box, we found the admission forms for the Waiwa School. So you had the Palama Settlement School and you had the Waiwa School. The forms, they contain a place for the student to put their name, their address, their phone number. And then the student's required to sign a waiver preventing them to have any action against Imperato or any of the representatives, right? So basically, you have to sign the front of this form that says, if you kill me, I can't sue you. Because I'm sure a lot of people felt like they were going to get killed in these classes. Now, what's unique is the front of the form, it has a stamp on it. And it looks like a manually placed stamp. And the stamp says, Kajukenbo Self-Defense Institute, method by Kempo Jiu-Jitsu. And Kempo is spelled with an M. So for the N versus this means this means that in Kempo and so forth. At the time, and I'm sure for several years following that, the method that the Imperato brothers taught was Kempo Jiu-Jitsu, just like Mitoshi taught, just like Chow taught. So that is stamped on these, and you can tell it's from a manual stamp because they're not all the same. Some are turned this way, some are turned that way. So the second page, it contains the heading, the Kajukenbo Self-Defense Institute, and it asks a question, what are your primary and secondary reasons for wanting to join this self-defense art? And it's really unique. So here is one that I have that I'll show. This is for Richard Takamoto, and this is September 9th, 1957. And you can't really see the stamp because it's a photocopy, but the stamp is right here. And it's a round circular stamp. I think it's farther back, maybe. I don't know. These are posted on my Facebook page, and they're also on kajukenbo.com. So the second page is cool because it tells you, like, hey, why do I want to get involved in martial arts? And they provide a little bio about this. You know, hey, why do I want to get involved? So I think what's cool with this is the earliest forms are dated September 9th, 1957. So that's a Monday. And for some reason, Great Grandmaster Sharonio kept these forms. They only go from September to December. Many of them are September 9th or 10th, which is a Monday and a Tuesday. So he has them, keeps them for his whole life. So possibly these are his students. The first time that this school is under his control. That's what I'm thinking. Like, he had taught for the Imperato brothers, but this is now his deal. So if you look at the forms, and we'll go back here and take a peek at this form again, there's a signature block. Are you there? Oh, there you go.
I found it. Here it is.
There you go.
And
So there's a signature block. Let's use that one.
Here's that seal you were talking about right here. That stamp. That stamp.
That stamp. So it's hard to tell what it says. So if I tell you what it says Kajukenbo Self-Defense Institute. And it says method by Kempo Jiu-Jitsu. And Jiu-Jitsu is spelled out. It's not the short spelling. It's a full JIU spelling. So on these forms, they're signed by George Sharonio. If you can go a little bit farther over and up, you can see George Sharonio signs that, and then John Ventura witnesses this one. That's probably the only one John Ventura witnessed. All the other ones are witnessed by Antonio A. Ramos, who is known as Tony Ramos. He was my first Kajukenbo instructor. Then you can see Adriano Imperato signs it, and then Joseph Imperato signs it. I mean, these are really cool if you're looking at the historical perspective of Kajukenbo's beginnings. So what is also cool from these forms, several of these guys went on to get their black belt. So Richard Takamoto, he starts September 9th, 57. He gets a black belt from Imperato. He's on the black belt family tree. Richard Chun starts the next day, September 10th. He gets a black belt. Pedro Jerry Martin, who was also, several of these guys were law enforcement too. So Jerry Martin was also longtime law enforcement, retired law enforcement. But he started on the 16th of September in 57. And then Curtis Orion, who is a grandmaster, he's deceased now, but he was Kajukenbo grandmaster. According to his paperwork, he started training in Kajukenbo at the Waiwa School in November of 1957. There's about 45 of these forms. Again, they're all witnessed by Sharonio, so I think that's pretty cool. Now, there's often conversations about the schools, and it's often, well, they didn't have any women and kids didn't train there. In looking at these forms, there are some female names. Okay. And there are also several names, 4 or 5 of them, that are under the age of 18. And one male student is only 16 years old. And he's got a waiver signed by a parent. So there are no kids per se, but there is a 16-year-old training in this class, and there are men and women. Maybe not at Palama, but it's going on at Waiua. So I think it's important to share that information too. So I think with these forms, it's important to know that these are the earliest known documents that contain the name Kajukenbo and the organizational name of the Kajukenbo Self-Defense Institute. That doesn't mean there aren't earlier forms in someone's possession, because prior to getting these forms, we thought December 28th was the first time Kajukenbo was ever used publicly. But on these forms, we know now September 9th is the first time based on these forms. But this is a universal form. Angelo, this doesn't say Waiua Kajukenbo on it. It says Kajukenbo Self-Defense Institute. So this could have been any of the schools. It could be the Palama School, the Kaimuki School, the IAEA School. There was a school in Eva. They had multiple Kajukenbo schools about this same time. They all seem to come out around 1957. So this form could have been used at any of them. It may have been used sooner at some. It could have been used at Palama earlier than this. We just don't have copies of it. And sadly, back then, no one would have thought, why should I keep this? It's no big deal. I just signed this form. I'm going to throw it away with everything else since I don't do it anymore.
I mean, even like right now, I have Jeez, when I started my program out here, the dates are already hazy for me, and we're not even talking about long history here. We're talking like 6 years ago. I don't know. I know I keep all the waivers. My wife always asks me, like, some of these students aren't even here anymore. You got like 50, you got like 50 or 60 waivers signed and 20 people training. Like, why are you holding on? Well, because they come back sometimes. It's true, they do come back. Like, I have 60 people signed to the program, 20 regulars, and 40 people. She's like, but when do they show up? But they do. That's the problem. Like, a year will go by, so they'll go off to college. Or I have one guy who ended up he tested to be a civil engineer, I think it was, and so he left the prefecture to take the test outside, and then he sent me a message recently. I thought he was gone. I'm like, okay, he's gone, and I kept the waiver. I haven't seen him for 6 months now, and but I keep the waiver because he sends me a message and he says, hey, I failed the test. I feel ashamed. I'm going to come back home now. I got to go back to my parents, and I want to start training again. And like, it's okay, the dojo's open, but you never know where life will take a person. So I always keep the waivers. But my wife's always asking me, like, why don't you throw this stuff away? And I always think to myself, oh.
No, think about this. So Joe Davis, Senior Grandmaster Joe Davis, he's my Imperato method instructor. He still has the card he got from Aleo Reyes, his teacher. It's his membership card, and it's dated June of 1962. And then Joe went and trained with Bruce Lee in Oakland. And so he has a card from Bruce Lee from when he started training there, and Bruce signs and stuff. So there's that part, like, you don't know who your teacher is going to be later on down the road. But I mean, look at Bobby Ceronio, right? He's his son, little Bobby. He's making a heck of a name for himself in the MMA world. And someday he might be world champ. And I'm going to say, hey, I knew you win, right? That's the stuff. You don't know who these guys are going to be.
Yeah, and then for those of you who don't know, check out Bellator. Bobby Ceronio the third. I think he's the third.
Bobby's the third.
Bobby's the third. He's
whose great grandfather is George Paulie Ceronio that we were talking about, one of the Kajukenbo's earliest instructors. That's his great grandfather.
Yeah. So he fights in MMA. Want to check it out? Yeah, that's a modern connection. So yeah, like I said, but you said this is how it happens, right? As we don't know where things are gonna go. For when we're doing our stuff, we're just holding on to paperwork, and at one point we're asking ourselves, should we get rid of it? Should we throw it away? Because to us, we're not thinking that someone's gonna dig this up 60 years later and start talking about where the school was founded and who's teaching who. Two dorks are gonna get online and start talking about this stuff.
No, it was Tuesday afternoon. No, it was Wednesday morning. Right. The fact that we still care just shows the passion about the arts and themselves.
Exactly.
But, I mean, so for what we were talking about today, look, we know the general timeline when they came up with the name Kajukenbo, and we know the co-founders came up with it. We probably are leaning a little bit more towards Hulk, only because Imperato had told John Bishop that, and then Hulk said it himself. But it could have been Chu, or it could have been a combination of all of them, with Frank Ordonez saying, yeah, I agree, let's do that. But it came out of their time period. The question is, why wasn't it used between the time that they came up with it until we found this stuff in 57? Why did Imperato keep it under wraps? Was he still working on it? Did he not want to use the name? Was he using Kempo Jiu-Jitsu to honor his teacher, William Chow, and honor Matose? Did they have a falling out? And he said, okay, forget it. I'm doing my own thing. I'm moving forward. Kajukenbo is my art. This is what I'm doing. All kinds of things could have happened. We don't know. We weren't there. And the people that do know are probably not with us anymore. I'm sure some family members know the real story, but maybe haven't quite shared all of that with everybody. But this is what we have. We know this information here, and the first public use of the name Kajukenbo in a newspaper, December 28, 1957. The first public known use of the name Kajukenbo in Kajukenbo Self-Defense Institute would be September 9th, 1957. And if someone has some documents out there that are older than that, man, love to hear from you. You can get a hold of me really easy. I'm easy to get a hold of. UKFcertified.com is my website. Coach Mitch Powell at hotmail.com is my email. And then I want to put a shout out to Christopher Reyes. Christopher Reyes is the grandson of the late great Grandmaster Leo Reyes and the son of the late senior Grandmaster Alan Reyes. Christopher's a Sigum, Kajukenbo Sigum, and he has Kajukenbo.com, and he is putting this site together. It's pretty cool, man. He's got a lot of historic documents from his family's lineage, from the Reyes Kempo karate lineage on there. And he's trying to get some of the senior guys to put their bios on there. So if we've got Kajukenbo grandmasters, professors out there that are interested in sharing their either history, you can put a bio up on this website. If you have an event that's coming up, you can post that on this website. You're doing a seminar or tournament or whatever. Christopher is trying to get this to be the Kajukenbo go-to website. One-stop shop for everything Kajukenbo. So I'm going to put this plug in for him. He's a great guy. He's extremely talented, not just in the martial arts stuff, but in tech world, filmmaking, interviewing, and so forth. He's really good at this. So check that out. A lot of the stuff that I end up with that's historical based generally comes from, the Imperato family, Glenn Fraticelli, Kimo Imperato, that, they oversee the KSDI, right? So they have documents and photographs and stuff like that are shared, and they get a chance to see those things. They've done a lot for Kajukenbo in trying to keep everything preserved. So definitely want to throw a shout out to those guys for even making a lot of this possible for us, the historians, the people that want to share this story.
Send me a link later, and I'll put that when I make this video. I'll put the link. So anybody watching at this point, I know I'm talking like present, past tense. This podcast is in the fourth dimension. So when I'm talking in the future, the past, and the present all at the same time. But you're gonna send me a link. So if you look in the comments of YouTube, there'll be a link to that either in the comments or in the video description for the website that he just mentioned. The www.kajukenbo.com. Is that right?
Kajukenbo.com, yeah.
All right. And also, I was gonna say one more thing. Oh well, it must not have been that important. Yeah, so yeah, I'll put the link there for anybody watching. You can check out the links in the video description or in the comments. Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna say. If any of you want to contact me or Mitch, you can literally jump right into the YouTube comments and if you're scared about that, you can literally just post, please contact me. I want to talk. I've had people do this. I'll throw I'm a public entity, so I don't mind putting my email address out there. I don't know how many scammers, hackers have tried to get to me already. I'm not challenging these people, but so far so good. I will put my email on there. If you're afraid to put your email address out there, I'll throw my email address out there. You can contact me, and we can do this in private. So you can contact Mitch too. So that's another easier way.
And think about this: we've had people make comments that you followed up on, and they a couple of times have added to the information that we have, or corrected something that we thought we knew, and they said, no. Based on this is what you should be saying, or this is what we know. And as long as it's supported by a document that we can verify and not someone just talking story, that's what we look for. I love to talk story, but I have to be able to prove the things that I say. So if you take a look at John Bishop's book, you'll see pages and pages of documentation on who he spoke to, on who provided this information, where it came from. That's the stuff that you need to have to make this stuff work for everybody in the future. Because if we go back to talking story, we got 5 supernatural human beings that could defy gravity, that slayed dragons. And I mean, just all this silly stuff. These were, 5 just very fortunate men that were able to get together, train together, and come up with enough of a sense of combining their arts together to create techniques and start this process moving forward. they weren't trying to change the world, man. They were just trying to train with each other. And I'm sure there was a little bit of, can I kick this guy's ass? Let me check it out. And from there, they respected each other and they moved forward, and they got this stuff written down, and they took some photographs. And then now you look, and you can go to a lot of places around the United States and you can find somebody teaching some flavor of Kajukenbo.
Yeah, and they didn't have to slay dragons. Although I do like the slaying dragon story. Uh, I still like my story. They all fought in the war and died. Only one survived.
Yes.
Only one survived.
At least someone survived, right? Emperor survived.
Old Pirano survived. One survived. The other 5 masters died. I love that story. I don't tell it to anyone. Well, I told it for the first time here.
If Hollywood made that movie, that's probably what they would do.
That's a great movie, man. 5 guys, 1 student. Everyone goes to the war. He sits there and just is grinding as each one is killed in the war, just heartbroken. Comes back. I mean, that's an amazing movie, really. It's a war movie. It's a martial arts movie. Hollywood. It's a martial arts movie. It's a war movie. It's a historical documentary all rolled into one.
I'll tell you, if I knew how to write a documentary, if I knew how to do a screenplay or whatever, the real Kajukenbo story would be an amazing screenplay.
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, it is. That's why I think it's funny that you hear the legend that it turns into, but then the actual story is just as cool. I mean, I don't want to get sidetracked because we are wrapping up. We are going to finish up, but the actual story is still really, really cool. Like the stories of them training at the abandoned military barracks, developing this art. Right,
and that's true. That is all true.
The street fights that came up, them shining shoes to make money, to make ends meet, getting into fights with people in the middle of all that. These are all great stories, and they would make a great screenplay. But don't contact me because I don't have all the information. Contact Mitch. He's got all the information if you're trying to put something like that together. All right, man. Anything else you want to say before we go?
No, man, we covered it. We told some history here, and it's history that I hope is shared instead of some of the silly stuff that you read on the internet and see on some of these Facebook pages. But this is our history. This is what we know about it so far. So I just appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk about this and to cite the resources. And, the art is still not very old. Our martial art was founded in 1947, so we've still got a ways to go. We can continue to work on it, not only just the history part, but building our leadership. We've got some good guys out there calling the shots right now. I'm impressed with Kajukenbo's current leadership. We could use some more people to step up. We need more people to run schools. We do a lot of garage training, and I'm guilty of that too. I ran a commercial school for quite a few years, but I do a lot of garage teaching now. But we do need more of the big schools and keep this art going, keep it alive, and keep it Kajukenbo. Please don't create your own techniques and create your own forms and call it Kajukenbo. Use the ones that are already there. That would be my plea. But I think we're doing really good. We just had an annual gathering in Las Vegas, and I thought it turned out fantastic. But we're doing well as an organization. We're doing well as martial art. We just need to open up other, Middle East is starting to develop and grow now. Europe's done pretty well, has for quite a few years. Just need to keep going, keep pushing forward.
All right. Well, Mitch, thanks again for coming on the show. I always learn a lot, and hopefully my viewers can learn a lot too. And Social Gelo with Angelo podcast. I forgot who called me. Someone called me and said, you should call it the Kajukenbo podcast. And I said, no. So I forgot. Yeah, I forgot. Someone called me and said, someone called me or posted or said something like that. I was like, no, I'm not going to do it. Social Gelo with Angelo podcast. Podcast about psychology, martial arts, a lot of Kajukenbo because it's the art that I practice and teach. I used to say once a month. I been doing them once a week lately, but don't quote me on that. But there is, lately it's been once a week. But you'll always get at least once a month. So check it out. Catch y'all next
So
time.
you're the once a month Kajukenbo podcast by Angelo.
Yeah, fine. All right. I'll see y'all later. Thanks again, Mitch.
All right. Cool.